what are the expected impacts physically, and how has the global community worked towards dealing with it. So, what are greenhouse gases and do we need them? And so, greenhouse gases are gases that exist in our atmosphere and that work to trap heat within our atmosphere itself rather than having it escape. So when we get solar radiation from the sun that enters into our atmosphere and then it reflects off of our surfaces, some of that heat remains in our immediate atmosphere and some of it escapes. And that is due to the existence of these greenhouse gases. So the reason why they're called greenhouse gases is because similar to the way greenhouse works to trap the heat for the plants to thrive and grow, that's what these gases do for our Earth. So what we see at the diagram on the left is the way that it happens in nature in a more in a balanced way, a very hypothetical balanced way, is that solar radiation enters and you get that reflection or re-radiation of the heat, and then some heat is trapped to maintain life on Earth. Now, but as it stands, had we not had these greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, our planet would be extremely cold and would be unlivable. So it's very important for us to understand that greenhouse gases do have a positive role to play. However, what is not positive is the excess of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, which is what the diagram on the right shows us. So having too many greenhouse gases in our atmosphere has intensified the greenhouse gas effect and thus has caused moving the pendulum from extreme cold to the extreme warmth that we are witnessing today, and we have been witnessing year on year in the last 10 years. So the more greenhouse gases, the more warmth is trapped and less warmth escapes. So greenhouse gases are important for balance and are important for the survival of humans and also our ecosystems and all our different terrains, and whether water or land terrains. So, because without them, the Earth would be an uninhabitable wasteland, but too much of them causes the same effect where the Earth becomes uninhabitable due to extreme heat. So what are the actual greenhouse gases that exist in our atmosphere? They're carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur hexafluoride, fluorinated gases such as HFCs and HCFCs that exist in coolants, water vapor, and ozone. And it's important for us to understand that there are more than one type of greenhouse gas and that come from different industries, as we will see later. So the relative contribution of these gases, how do I decide what is more important and how do we tackle the different ones? So as we all know, we are all very familiar with carbon dioxide as a gas that we emit through our activities. So as it stands today, through our activities, our daily activities, like through industry and even through cattle and agriculture, we produce larger amounts of certain greenhouse gases than others. So carbon dioxide is the one that we produce the most through our human activity or anthropogenic activity. However, not only do the different greenhouse gases vary, but some of them stay in the atmosphere for a longer period of time versus a shorter period of time. And also, to top that off, some greenhouse gases have stronger warming potentials than others. So for example, 1 kg of methane traps about 25 to 28 times the heat as 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide. So when you talk about greenhouse gases, there's a lot of dynamics that come into play and have to be taken into consideration when we calculate the effect of these greenhouse gases. And with that comes in a term called global warming potential. And that is a measure of how much energy the emissions of one gas will absorb over a given period of time relative to the emissions of 1 ton of carbon dioxide. And if you may have seen in articles and even in some statements that a lot of people use the term carbon dioxide equivalent sometimes, and that is to refer to all the gases compared to carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is used as that common denominator for these calculations. So in essence, the larger the global warming potential, the more that a given gas warms up the Earth compared to carbon dioxide over a given period of time. So for example, here are the different sources of the different greenhouse gases. So carbon dioxide emissions from factories, burning fossil fuels, cars, deforestation, where we lose the carbon dioxide that has been stored in trees. And that's important for us to be aware of as well. Methane comes from waste disposal, mining, agriculture, nitrous oxide from cars and fertilizers, and HFCs from refrigerators and deodorants and air conditioners, and that's something very important for us here. And sulfur hexafluorides as well from electrical substations, smelters, etc. So as you can tell, like the global warming potential, for example, for HFCs can go up to around 15,000 times that of carbon dioxide. So, which is why it has been a very important gas to tackle, and there are protocols set for it as well. So as you can tell that it's very important for us to have this information in the back of our minds to understand what our daily activities can actually cause. So this graph kind of shows us the different levels of emissions of our greenhouse gases from the 1990s until today. And if you take a look at the graph, it shows that around 65 to 70% of our emissions are mostly CO2 from our different activity, but we still have a significant amount of the other greenhouse gases as well. But you see that a big chunk comes from energy, so from electricity, power, etc. So it's good for us to keep in the back as well, and to understand what our emissions are coming from and what the sources are as well. So where in energy, it's usually traditionally been fossil fuels as well. Next. So the impacts. Projected impacts of climate change on our ecosystems and on our environment. If we take a look at what the expected impacts are at 1.5 degrees Celsius, we will see 100% increase in flood risk. And we will see at least 1 billion people getting exposed to severe heat waves every 5 years, and up to 90% loss of world's coral reefs. And the last two facts are very important for us as well living in the Gulf, because we do live in one of the warmest areas already. So these heat waves will affect the Gulf region and the MENA region. And also the 90% loss of the world's coral reefs. And it's very important for us as well, because I mean, there is a fishing industry here, and the coral reefs and basically the marine biodiversity is so important from many aspects, whether it's for medicinal purposes or providing us, again, like fish or other sources of food, and even for ecotourism. So if we lose that kind of life, we might lose the whole ecosystem and actual different species in the Gulf, and it will affect our lives directly and indirectly. Now, that is just for 1.5 degrees Celsius. We also have expected impacts at 2 degrees. Now, at 2 degrees Celsius, we will see an expected 170% increase in flood risk, and from 1 billion to 2.7 billion people being exposed to heat waves every 5 years, and almost a complete, over 99% loss of the world's coral reefs. So, and 49 million people impacted by sea level rise as well. And that also is very important, because most cities are actually based on the coast, so that will impact a lot of cities' infrastructures as well. So it's very important for us to see that even in that 0.5 degrees Celsius change, a lot will change, and it will really negatively impact our environment and our ecosystems and our livelihood. So this is why it's very important for all of us to work towards limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius and not 2 degrees Celsius. Next. Projected impacts in the Gulf. So the UAE and the Gulf temperatures are projected to increase 2 to 3 degrees Celsius during the summer by 2060 to 2079. sea surface temperatures to increase 1 to 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, expected sea level rise of up to 9 meters. The Gulf will become more saline due to more heat and then more evaporation. And finally, humidity is projected to increase by about 10% over the Arabian Gulf. Now, it's important to understand all of these, how these actually affect you. So again, like I was saying, infrastructure, with sea level rise, a lot of the infrastructure and where we all live, like our houses and hotels and many of the main infrastructure of the city and of the country are on the coast, and even our desalination plants, because that's how we get access to water. And if the Arabian Gulf is expected to be more saline and the temperatures are going to increase, that also affects negatively our access to desalinated water, because it affects the process of desalination. And finally, humidity is very important for us to be aware of, because even if only just the temperatures were rising, our bodies are able to regulate their internal temperatures by sweating. So not to say that it's tolerable, but if we are able to sweat, our body will be better able to adapt. However, with increased humidity, your body will not be able to sweat in the heat. And therefore, it can cause increased heat exhaustion, heat cramps, and heat strokes. So this directly affects our health as well, and something for us to be very aware of, that it affects us. Climate change affects us personally. It doesn't just affect the land or like the animals in the sea or whatever. It affects humans as well, and it affects your health directly. And I personally can attest to the fact that walking outside has been very difficult in